Good Wednesday evening, folks. Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandajis here with you. At 8:30 tonight, major Category 3 hurricane Milton made landfall in Florida, much ahead of schedule as it did speed up and accelerate as it lifted off towards the north. Let's go over to radar and show you exactly what I'm looking at here. This is a loop over the last 2 hours. You can see Milton had a pretty clear, defined center of circulation there, an eye is visible on radar. And as it made landfall, it kind of fell apart. And it is dissipating as it's over land right now. Winds are coming on down, but it made landfall as a Category 3, excuse me, of 120 mile per hour winds. A gust to 150. Moving east-northeast at 15. So now the official statement from the Hurricane Center reads like this. Extremely dangerous Category 3 Hurricane Milton made landfall near Siesta Key, Florida. Doppler radar indicated that the eye of Hurricane Milton has made landfall near Siesta Key in Sarasota County along the west coast of Florida. Now, the definition of a landfall is the center of the storm intersecting with the coast or land. And the eye wall made landfall, the northern eye wall made landfall probably an hour or so ago, and that is where we are finding the strongest of the wind. So looking at it on radar here, I'll point it out for you. So we've got the eye wall and we've got the actual center of Milton. That's now pretty much where you see the title of Sarasota. That's where the center of Milton is. Off to the north there where you see the bright radar returns, the reds, the orange, and then the yellows, that is the northern eye wall. So leading up to landfall here, we actually had the center was open to the south, meaning it was falling apart. Shear was starting to do its thing. Dry air was getting pulled in from the south, and the southern portion of the eye wall was actually open. So it was no longer really a bona fide, strong, intense tropical cyclone. But we do still have the winds that are staying up, and they'll start to come down pretty quickly now that it's over land. Again, sustained of around 120. Now that we're using live radar here from Tampa, we can actually get a feel for what the winds may be like within Milton. So what you're looking at here is the same product that we use when we're diagnosing where we might find a tornado spin up. And tornadoes are another thing we're going to talk about in a second, because Florida had an epic tornado outbreak today. And wait until you see the number of tornado warnings that were issued just within the last 12 hours, really. So back to this. We're looking at the velocity signature. And what this is radar depicting the motion of wind particles and which direction they're moving in. And why it's helpful with tornadoes is we can get couplets. Kind of what we're seeing here is a large couplet, right? So the yellows and reds that you're seeing there that are bright, those are outbound winds from the radar site in Tampa. And if we put some numbers on those here, so this is going to be the radar picking up on how fast these wind particles are moving. So we'll go over Tampa Bay, out into the Gulf. So these winds have actually come way down since I last looked at this, but we're looking at some numbers there. You can see it on your screen, 70 to 85 miles per hour. Now, this is a pretty good sample because when the radar beam shoots out, it's shooting out at an angle. So the farther out you go, the higher the elevation of that beam is. So when you're shooting out, very far away, you're getting a sampling higher up in the cloud. So it's not a very good reading for what may be happening at the surface. So now that we're getting closer to the radar beam, we're getting a better sampling here, like the winds over Tampa Bay right now, 70 miles per hour or so with some higher gusts. In fact, at landfall in here, they said, the National Weather Service said that there was some a sustained wind reported of 78 miles per hour, and a gust of 97 miles per hour was reported in Venice. Also, a sustained wind of 77 and a gust of 100 was reported at a station at the Egmont Channel in Tampa Bay there. So certainly Category 1 for sustained winds in there, and Category 2 strength wind gusts. So there's a look at some of the outbound winds, okay? So this is wind that's blowing out of Tampa Bay. What we're concerned with is the onshore component of these winds. And we're going to go a little bit farther south here to find that, because you have to go to the south and southeast of the center of Milton, which, again, looking at it on this imagery, is here right over. Let me put actually a big spin on here so you can actually see where it is. It's pretty much right here. That's where the center of Milton is. It is intersected with the coastline in Sarasota County, near Siesta Key, which that's where it made landfall about at 10 minutes ago at 8:30. as a Cat 320 mile per hour winds. If you're just joining us, by the way, thanks for tuning in on our 13 News Now Plus app. Plus, we're streaming tonight on YouTube to kind of get more folks involved. I know you've got a lot of choices for streaming out there. Glad you're tuning in here. We're going to go deep dive into Milton and show you really what's going on kind of under the hood here. And as we go forward in time, now that it's made landfall, what happens next? Well, we'll talk about that in just a second. So here's the landfall. We'll discuss that first. Right over Sarasota County, Siesta Key. We've got the outbound winds to the north and northwest of there, that yellow shading. That's going to be all of the winds blowing out of Tampa Bay, right? So we're blowing around the center of circulation there. Now, what we're concerned with is a little farther to the south here, which we're not getting a great sample on the winds. Let me put the center back on here. We're going to be concerned with the winds that are coming, wrapping around, and then coming onshore. That's going to be driving up the storm surge values. And I was looking at some of the gauges. Farther south, in places like Naples, they were experiencing major flooding already from just the outer circulation, the winds blowing onshore for a persistent amount of time, hours and hours ahead of landfall, but well to the northwest of where it was located. Probably Port Charlotte getting some pretty good storm surge values in there now. So all of those winds, some speeds on those, again, blowing onshore, 40, 50, 60 miles per hour. But again, we're kind of getting a bad sample here from the radar site because, again, we're blowing into the dry sector of the storm. And we're just not getting a good sample because it's getting blocked by all the rainfall and the hydrometeors to the north there. So anyway, that's where you're going to find the strongest of the winds, storm surge. Sorry, that's going to be off to the southeast of the center of Milton now that it has made landfall. So let's get a better look here at what's going on in the Tampa Bay area in terms of wind gust potential as noted by radar. So Tampa itself, radar indicating here 30 to 60 mile per hour winds. Out over the bay itself, we see those jump to 60 to 80 miles per hour. So why the difference? Well, we're over the bay, and we're clocking some of the strongest winds out over the Gulf of Mexico still. Over the water, there's much less friction. The frictional component of the storms interacting with land really weakens the surface winds. The second that storm moves onshore and winds are coming in off onshore, the land interaction, the frictional component, slows those winds down. And you get wind gusts that are much less. Out over the open waters, you're going to find the strongest of the winds, and that's a great example of what we're finding here at this time. But that's radar indicated. What about some actual ground truth? Some observations that have been picked up from some area observation stations. And yeah, some strong wind gusts, 93 mile per hour gust today so far out at Sarasota. Tampa, 64 miles per hour. And you notice the majority of all the reporting stations in central and northern Florida have seen at least tropical storm force wind gusts, which is 39 miles per hour or greater. 55 out at Fort Myers, and even on the east coast of Florida, Fort Pierce at 60 miles per hour, and Daytona Beach at 58. So, of course, those wind gusts and the tornado outbreak that we'll talk about in a second has really hurt the power outage situation. Currently, this was as of just a little while ago, 600,000 were without power so far. In fact, I can check it right now as we're on and see what that number may have jumped to, because I bet you it's even higher than that right now. Yeah, we're up to almost 700,000 outages within the state of Florida. If you recall, just 2 weeks ago when Helene made landfall as a Cat 4 along the Panhandle, the number of outages in Florida alone was well over 1 million. I think we definitely see that again. So over 1 million customer outages in 2 weeks in Florida. So that grid is not doing too well this evening. Let's take a second, and I want to show you, kind of go back in time of earlier today and the tornado outbreak that occurred with the outermost bands preceding the landfall of Milton. And here we are. This was anywhere from lunchtime to around 6 o'clock. And notice all the polygons popping on up. The red polygons are just tornado warnings issued because of radar-indicated rotation. You'll also see some magenta and purplish type polygons pop up. Those are radar-confirmed or ground-confirmed tornadoes. And if you've been perusing social media at all today, you'll see many of the videos of actual massive wedge tornadoes, which are uncharacteristic of landfalling hurricanes. Okay, usually they're brief. Most of them are weak. 90% of tornadoes associated with hurricane landfalls are on the weaker side, EF0 to EF1. I wouldn't doubt if we see some of these classified once the Weather Service can get out and assess all of this. So think of all the stuff they have to do. They're covering a landfalling hurricane, and now they've got dozens probably of damage locations that they have to investigate, forensically analyze to see what was the grade of the tornado that touched down. We'll see most of those come out within the next week. It'll probably be a little bit delayed. And also the issue with tornadoes that occur during a hurricane is that usually it takes a little time to get to it to assess the damage, but you have to kind of delineate between what was caused by the hurricane winds and what was caused by the tornado itself. So it could be a little tricky to actually get those classifications out in a reasonable amount of time. But there's how you have it. You see them all popping on up there. Florida was lighting up. Look at the number so far of tornado warnings issued. 121. It's a lot. That's a lot for the National Weather Service offices to be pushing out. And you notice that if you live in Central Florida, odds are you were under at least one tornado warning this afternoon. And many of these proved to be verified and validated by an actual tornado on the ground. So just fascinating. I mean, this is probably one of the most prolific tornado outbreaks from a landfalling hurricane that we've seen. If you recall back to earlier in the season with Beryl, it made landfall in southeast Texas. That was only a Category 1. But to the northeast of that center, we had the outer bands, and that also caused a very extensive tornado outbreak as well. So they're not uncommon. And from where we're broadcasting from here in Norfolk, Virginia, Hampton Roads area, we actually had to deal with the outer bands from two tropical systems this season. That was Helene, just 2 weeks ago. We had the outer band of that, numerous tornado warnings here locally, and then Debbie as well. So typically here in our area, when we get a landfall that occurs anywhere to our southwest, along the Gulf Coast, the Florida Panhandle, and maybe even the southeast portion of the United States, and it loops up to the north. Whenever we are located on the east side of the center of that system as it's building inland, we typically get tornado outbreaks. And one that I recall a lot is Isaias back in 2020, when we had, I think it was an EF3 tornado that broke out in North Carolina, and that actually caused a few fatalities. So sometimes they can be quite strong, and they come on very quickly as well. So let's go back here and talk about Milton. If you're just joining the stream, it did make landfall at 8:30 tonight. If you remember, if you watched streams, if you watched our videos on the coverage of Milton, landfall was projected to be in the middle of the night. So it actually was accelerating the timeline because of this interaction with the jet stream. You look at it here on the infrared satellite imagery, and you'll notice that it's kind of stretched out, right? So some of the higher clouds are getting displaced well to the north and east. And if you look closely on there, I've put on the wind field, and that's for 35,000 feet up. It's starting to interact with the jet stream and wind shear that's coming in from the west and northwest. And that's actually been starting to tilt the system, which is why it was on a weakening trend since yesterday, and why it will continue to weaken, and why its cloud deck is getting kind of latitudinally like stretched out. So here in Norfolk, Virginia today, we actually had the outer cirrus cloud deck come on over and cloud up our day. We had a sunny start, and then the high clouds came on in and filtered that sunshine. So that's what we're dealing with here, and that's all thanks to the interaction with the jet stream. So as of this hour, as of 8:30, we will get an update in 10 minutes at 9 o'clock. They're doing hourly updates, by the way, Hurricane Center. They started that earlier this afternoon as we were nearing landfall. And we'll see just how much it actually weakened now that it's over land. I would bet it's probably no longer a Category 3. We'll probably see it down to a Category 2, and then it will just continue to weaken from there. Another look here at radar imagery, and we're seeing a lot of very heavy rainfall. Something you'll notice here, I'll go back here, last 2 hours on the loop. Let me go back 3 to give you more. So we'll go back here, and you see that the eye, that's 3 hours ago, so about 3 hours of pre-landfall. And you can see the eye is definitely more obvious. So it's cleared out, void of any, radar returns. To the north, we've got the northern eye wall that for the last 12 hours or so has been the most severe part of the storm. That's where we're seeing the strongest of the winds. When you see that tag of 120 mile per hour sustained winds, if you're going to find that, it's going to be in that northern eye wall here, in this case. Typically, on any hurricane, the northeast or the right front quadrant will be the strongest part of the hurricane. And that's for many reasons, but the biggest reason is that it ties in the forward motion. So we'll use an example here. So if this was moving to the north, on the right front quadrant, to the northeast of the center, we would have the strongest winds because it's moving at 15 miles per hour. So say we have 120 mile per hour sustained winds, you'd find winds in there of 135. So you add in the sustained winds and the forward motion as well. Behind the storm, you'd subtract that forward motion. So you'd have winds of coming in 105. And you're always going to find those strongest winds in the eye wall. And that's what we're seeing here also with the heaviest of the rain. So 3 hours ago, that's where it was located. Currently, you see as we went into landfall, that eye kind of disappeared from being visible on radar imagery as it was in the process of weakening. Now the center is right over the coast, right over Sarasota County, and building east-northeast at 15. So look at Tampa Bay right now. St. Petersburg just getting crushed with very heavy rain, very gusty winds. And you have to look here, too, to see where we're looking at the strongest or the largest storm surge values. So the center, let me draw this on here. It's just a little bit hard to put this on. So we've got the center here, right, in Sarasota County. And we've got the winds wrapping around this way. Okay? So they're blowing offshore, but areas like St. Petersburg are seeing those winds blow over the bay and pile up the water in the St. Petersburg area. With this part, where the center is located here, the center being due south, we've got the winds coming on over, blowing offshore generally, but since it's blowing over a body of water, and then you've got St. Petersburg, it's piling up the storm surge values there. As this begins to move inland to the east-northeast, eventually we'll see those winds turn and the storm surge values will go down in St. Petersburg, but they'll begin to pick up in areas like Sarasota, Bradenton, and even over into Tampa itself as it wraps around and we start to get those winds back onshore there. So it all has to do with the location of the center and where you're getting that onshore or offshore flow and just the diagnostics with that. Very heavy rainfall here as well. We're looking at probably 10 to 14 inches of rain by the time all is said and done here. So you've got the freshwater flooding, the rainfall, the heavy rain, probably rainfall rates 1, 2, 3 inches an hour, especially in that band there. You've got the storm surge flooding. You've got the gusty winds, power outage threat, trees down, blocked roadways. And then you've got the tornado threat, which for now at least has gone down a little bit. Earlier, it was just ramping on up in those areas. But let's get another check on the wind gusts so far that have been clocked. So we're still not seeing anything more than 93 out at Sarasota. That's the strongest wind gust so far. 64 miles per hour out of Tampa, Crystal River at 46, Lakeland at 56, and even the east coast of Florida is 60. So where does it go from here? So now that it has made landfall, it is going to drastically weaken, continue to be influenced by wind shear, become stretched out. Wind field is large, okay, and as it was interacting with the jet stream, it began to expand its wind field too. So more areas are experiencing stronger winds. It's just the corridor of the strongest, really most violent winds is lessened, but the overall impactful winds is spread out, if that makes sense. So it's a Category 3 right now, expected by later tonight, probably midnight, it'll be down to a Cat 1. So a rapid weakening. You've heard of rapid intensification. It can go the other way too. Rapid weakening, especially now that it's over land and we've got all these other things working against it. Now, in a scenario where there wasn't wind shear, say this was a storm, say Milton was actually strengthening up to landfall like Helene was. We could have easily seen it with this track, seen it move over the Florida peninsula, weaken a little bit, but then reemerge off the coast of Florida and re-intensify. What other storms did that? Ian. Ian made landfall Fort Myers area, moved over Florida, reemerged off the southeast coast, and made a secondary landfall in South Carolina back in 2022. And that, I believe, that made landfall like high-end Cat 4. I'm not sure if in postseason if it was ramped up to a Cat 5 or not. I can't recall. But it was like high-end Cat 4 here. At least this was not as strong, so it was a middle-grade Category 3. Bigger picture, it accelerates to the east. Again, it's getting carried by that jet stream now, and it moves away from land. If you look carefully, I say it's away from land, it's away from the United States. If you look carefully here in the northern part of the cone, this is as the tropical depression, a remnant low at that point, there is the island of Bermuda. So it's not completely avoiding land, but it won't be as big a deal as it is right now in Florida here as it goes forward out in time. If you're wondering, well, what's next? Been inactive last month or so, even though we're a month out from the peak of the season, we still got Leslie out there. Leslie was a hurricane, weakened to a tropical storm, and then re-intensified. It's actually going to gain strength to a Cat 2. But notice the track out there. It's staying out to sea, no threat. Two other areas we're watching. Both have actually recently been downgraded in terms of its probability of developing. Next name on the list is Nadine, by the way. Both of these at 10%, so considered low chances of developing here. And both are staying well away from land either. What I will say, and I just will kind of put this out there and briefly mention it. Do I think that the season is done? I don't. I think we're going to see something else come out of the Caribbean, maybe within the next 7 to 10 days, and it's going to be something to watch. This time of the year, the areas to focus on for development aren't way out in the Atlantic, in the area of the main development region that we always talk about in July, August, and September, that typically feed many of our major long-lived hurricanes. That, this time of the year, is shutting down, even though we still have activity out there, which is unusual in and of itself. We focus more on the Caribbean, the Gulf, and the Southwest Atlantic this time of year, later in the season. And that's what produced Milton, and that's what produced Helene. So we'll have to continue to watch that, I think, for at least a couple more weeks before the overall favorable background state that's currently in play will begin to settle down just a little bit. So that's what we're tracking out there right now. We'll probably be in for a quiet period of weather for a little while before we'll have to maybe focus on the Caribbean and the Gulf yet again. One more time, I just want to reiterate, if folks are just joining this stream, and again, thank you, on our 13 News Now Plus streaming app. You can download that to Roku, Fire TV, and Apple TV to get our streams all the time and get a little update when we do streaming. And, of course, on our YouTube channel as well, which has been a great way for us to reach many people all across the country and the world and talk about the tropical threats that we're experiencing here in the United States this season. You know, after a quiet start to our season, things really ramped up considerably over the last couple of weeks, and we've seen many landfalling storms in the U.S., unfortunately, two of which major hurricane landfalls in the state of Florida. So here's Major Hurricane Milton, still at this hour, technically still a major hurricane, although it's made landfall 30 minutes ago. It's rapidly weakening. It is likely not a major hurricane anymore. It's moving east-northeast at 15, made landfall around 8:30, so 30 minutes ago at 120-mile-per-hour winds. And now you can see it's really kind of losing its characteristics. Remember that eye we were looking at just 24 hours ago? Very well-defined eye, center of circulation with a powerful Category 5 hurricane. We don't have that anymore. It's because of the wind shear, it's because of the land interaction, and it's well past its peak, okay? But we are still seeing significant impacts in areas like Tampa Bay. So we've got the center of circulation now that's still in Sarasota County, a little farther inland. Again, it's moving at 15 miles per hour, so not relatively slow. It's actually a pretty good clip for a landfalling hurricane. But to the north of there, we have the northern eye wall, which, if we switch things over to radar imagery here in terms of wind speeds, we can get a gauge for what the wind speeds may be like. So here over land, look at some of these wind gusts here. Well inland, look at those numbers in the blue. So that is winds that are blowing towards the radar site. Those are inbound winds, wrapping around the center of circulation. So well inland, gusts could certainly be 80, 90 miles per hour. I'm discounting that 100-mile-per-hour wind gust because that's probably happening several hundred, if not a couple thousand feet up. It's probably not verifying down to the ground because of that one component I talked about, the friction, the frictional component of the land slowing things down. So finding a 100-mile wind gust, 100-mile-per-hour wind gust that far inland when there hasn't even been one observed at the coast is a little bit suspect. So we'll discount that one, but certainly 60, 70, 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts a possibility. That reminds me, let's look at the power outages. We're now over 800,000. So since we last checked, 100,000 more people have lost power, sitting right now at a total of 805,000 customers in the state of Florida. By the way, this is via poweroutage.us. It's a website you can visit with all the latest power outage updates here, and they kind of aggregate all the different power companies and get a number for you. So it's a very good, useful resource. 805,000 folks in Florida right now without power. Big reason for that, of course, is Milton. I mean, we've got the gusty winds, trees are coming down, saturated ground after a predecessor rain event. Very wet week. On top of that, another half foot to a foot of rain. Gusty winds, just a recipe for a large power outage event. Second in 2 weeks in the state. Still, some of the strongest of the winds are sitting just offshore. So in the bright yellows here, we're getting, well, even those aren't even that high anymore. They've really been coming on down. So 70 miles per hour, according to radar here. And these are winds, by the way, that are outbound. So these are blowing offshore, behind the wraparound flow behind Milton, which center is right about here. Okay, so it's wrapping around in this direction. And the winds are blowing away from the radar site in Tampa that you can see it shooting out from there. So winds are coming down already. Some very strong wind gusts still inland. The storm now losing kind of its intensity, that it's away from its fuel source, the warm, extremely warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, that throughout its duration of its track the last 5 days, it's been over ocean waters that were 85 to 89 degrees. You only need 80-degree water temperatures to facilitate the latent heat transfer from the ocean surface to the physical forces that build a tropical system. So we'll watch this decay, and I'll leave with you one more check of the wind gusts here to see if we have any changes on there in peak. Yeah, actually, Tampa just jumped to 82-mile-per-hour gusts. So that's a big increase there. They were in the 60s earlier, so a 20-mile-per-hour jump in the gust speed there. 93 still is the big one out at Sarasota. Nothing has beaten that just yet. And just again to visit and kind of reiterate the thought of this was a big tornado outbreak too. 121 tornado warnings issued this afternoon by local National Weather Service offices. And I would say that a lot of those, at least a fraction, are probably confirmed tornadoes once we get them to go out and investigate them. But here's the final track, although the track isn't all that important anymore. We know where it made landfall, Sarasota, Siesta Key area there, but it moves over the state of Florida tonight. By tomorrow morning, things will greatly improve in terms of overall conditions as it pulls away from the east coast of Florida, moves well out into the Atlantic. Winds will come down pretty quickly tomorrow morning, and then the cleanup process will continue after that. So that's the latest here. Milton has made landfall as of 8:30 this evening as a Category 3, 120-mile-per-hour wind major hurricane in Siesta Key, Florida. And now we'll begin that process of rapidly weakening over land and heading out to sea. I thank you for joining us on this live stream here on 13 News Now Plus and on our streaming platform on YouTube and elsewhere. I hope if you are in the path of this and you are somehow watching this and have electricity, that you stay safe and you heed local officials' warnings and you make it through the storm okay. But until the next storm or the next big weather event, we'll see you later. If you are joining us here locally and you want to come back and get a latest update on air, Dan Kennedy and I are on at 11 o'clock tonight for 13 News Now at 11, and we invite you to join us there. Have a good night.